Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started. We have a special guest who's coming, but he's delayed in traffic, so I'm going to start Solo here, and then Solo will be here. Solo is our guest. Mr. Solo Dennis is the new director of the Division of Public Health, where I work as the medical director, so I wanted to get a chance to introduce him to this very important meeting of our seniors. And you know, I do this monthly show that comes out on the YouTube channel, the Stay Connected with the Worcester Senior Center, and it's just really a pleasure because I get a lot of positive feedback. I don't know how many of you watch it, but if you're not watching it, you're probably not missing anything. But if you want to catch up, we kind of do a monthly update on some of the health challenges that we're facing both in Worcester and Massachusetts in general, and even broader, United States and the world. So here we are filming for the month of July, which is just around the corner. And this is the first time that we've done it with a live audience. So I want to give you guys a hand for showing up. Thank you. Thank you very much. So if you are familiar with how I run these shows, I usually talk a little bit about the month that we're in. So talking about the month of July, most of you probably know that July is named after Julius Caesar. He was the person that innovated the calendar that we now use. There was another calendar, the Gregorian calendar, and then we switched over to the Julian calendar, and Julius got the seventh month of the year, July. And July is the first full month of summer, sometimes can be called part of the dog days of summer because it's the hottest month of the year. And in July, we celebrate a bunch of very important events. Number one for this country is July the 4th, which is coming up, our Independence Day. And many of you know that Massachusetts is intimately linked with Independence Day because so much of the rebellion started right here in the Commonwealth. And this is something that's been talked about a lot in the historical meetings, that as much as Boston gets all the credit for the Tea Party and the Boston Massacre, right here in Worcester in 1774, so a full year before the Lexington Concord shot heard around the world, the local militia here in Worcester took over the Commons outside of City Hall and started to march and prepare for war and to prevent the British from collecting taxes here in Worcester. So many people call that really the first part of the American Revolution. Doesn't get a lot of credit, but Worcester doesn't get a lot of credit in the shadow of Boston anyway. That's just part of being the second city. The other thing that we celebrate in the month of July is it's National AIDS Awareness Day is July 21st, and National Liver Disease / Hepatitis Awareness Day is the 28th of July. And these are very important and unfortunate consequences of some very difficult viruses that are still plaguing us. Certainly HIV/AIDS has made amazing strides. I just saw that there's going to be a biography released this weekend of Rock Hudson. Remember Rock Hudson? Yeah, so he passed away in 1985. Handsome guy, everybody wanted to either date him or be him, depending on what you wanted to say. And there he was, living a closeted life as a gay man in Hollywood, and he unfortunately contracted HIV/AIDS. at a time when nobody was really accepting of that. One of his lasting legacies, I think, was to make it understood that this could happen to anyone, and it made AIDS, I think, a little bit more of a disease that we could accept in the list of diseases that people got, that, you know, didn't have to have stigma and shame attached to it. And there was also part here, you know, we just passed through Pride Month here in June, of a recognition that people shouldn't have to live closeted lives if they choose to be gay or whatever they choose. Well, whoever you choose to love, it doesn't need to be hidden. It doesn't need to carry with it a stigma. And I think Rock Hudson did a lot to help us get over that.
Magic Johnson?
Magic Johnson too, you're right. You know, it takes some of the celebrities who are willing to face up to their illness and to share it with the world. Absolutely, it makes a big difference. The hepatitis C problem, hepatitis in general, is a unfortunate consequence of a lot of things, but IV drug abuse is the #1 reason that we continue to see hepatitis C. And the numbers are unfortunately rising of patients with hepatitis C because the opioid problem that we have continues to rise. You may have seen that the Department of Public Health released some statistics from Massachusetts showing that we had an increase over the last 2 years of opioid deaths. And although we are doing better with the distribution of Narcan and preventing some of those opioid deaths, even with preventing a lot of opioid overdose deaths, we're still seeing an overall rise. The main reason for that is that opioids now, when you buy your heroin from your pusher, are being cut with fentanyl. You've heard this term. Fentanyl is a type of opioid. We use it in the hospital all the time because it's very short acting, and it works very nicely in terms of giving people sedation, giving people analgesia, pain relief, but it's quick, so it doesn't have to be that it lasts a day. So it's good for procedures, it's good for going to sleep, for anesthesia. It was never meant to be mixed with heroin, but unfortunately, because people buy this stuff and now there's a lot of homemade fentanyl out there. This is not fentanyl that's produced like in a pharmacy somewhere in Canada or in Mexico. It's being cooked in chemistry majors' dorm room somewhere. And that's where they're getting the fentanyl, and that's where they're mixing it. They're also mixing it, unfortunately, with another drug called xylocaine, which is not the kind of xylocaine that you used to use to inject yourself to give yourself skin numbing. This is a medical chemical that actually promotes sleepiness. And so we've heard the term used out on the street, oh, Narcan-resistant overdose, because when you go and find somebody who has passed out from an overdose of heroin mixed with this medication, when you give the Narcan, it doesn't wake the patient up as quickly because the other medication has a prolonged sleepy time. So what we're advising people is that if you don't get a response from the first dose of Narcan, don't wash your hands, go away and say, it's too late. Stick with the patient, do what you can to resuscitate them, give them a chance to get a second dose of Narcan, and then sometimes they will respond. So these are the realities of today. You know, I think having a national recognition day about drug-related consequences like hepatitis C, like HIV, is very important, because I think just like we talked about with Rock Hudson, the more you talk about this, the more people will feel comfortable in seeking help. There's many great programs here in Worcester to help with addiction services. There are many great programs here to help families who have someone with a substance use disorder to cope with this problem. AIDS Project Worcester is a really wonderful organization. They don't just deal with AIDS, they deal with hepatitis C, and they actually were our key player last summer in the outbreak of monkeypox. You remember we had this outbreak last summer. There is some fear that we might see that again, but the monkeypox vaccine was distributed by AIDS Project Worcester, and they gave out almost 6,000 doses of it here in Worcester, which is really remarkable because they're not a huge organization and it's kind of a small shop that they're in, but they have a very good network of getting the word out to the folks that might be affected. This mostly monkeypox was affecting gay males having sex with multiple partners, and these were the folk that they reached out to in their community and helped, I think, stem the tide. So we didn't see a huge spread everywhere. It was pretty much contained within almost 6 weeks of the initial outbreak. So July is also known as Family Fun Month. It's also known as Picnic Month. And my favorite, it's Hot Dog Month. I love hot dogs. I know, as a medical director for the Department of Public Health, I probably should not be saying I love hot dogs, but I can't help it. I love hot dogs. I am a regular fan of Coney Island Franks. I grill them at home, and probably I'll pay for it someday, but it's been worth it. It's been worth it. When I go to the ballpark, that's the first thing I go for. So at the Woo Sox Polar Park, they've got some awesome options for hot dogs, and I am guilty. So, the everything in moderation was what Aristotle said, and I think I don't have them 10 times a week, but I do like my occasional hot dog. So July is also a month where we see a lot of insect-related illnesses, right? So this is mosquito time. We had a fairly mild winter, so the prediction is that the mosquitoes are going to be pretty significant this summer. We are enrolled, as you probably know, the city of Worcester, City Manager Batista re-enrolled us this year in the spraying program that is run by the Mosquito Control of Central Massachusetts organization. And what they do is, and you probably have seen these hanging around, they have these kind of black boxes hanging from trees. They sample each week different areas where mosquitoes are trapped, and they see if any of them are carrying West Nile or triple E, Eastern equine encephalitis. Those are the two major ones that we're seeing. And so far, in the first batch that's come through, there's been nothing in Worcester County, which is good. When they do find one, they will target the particular neighborhood where they harvested these positive mosquitoes and tell them we're going to do some spraying. Now, they usually do the spraying from a truck that rolls through the neighborhood, and they try to give the residents advance notice so that they, for a couple of hours, close the windows, keep their pets and children or anybody else inside so they're not in the direct route of the spraying. But if there's multiple sites in a contiguous neighborhood, they'll do aerial spraying. And similarly, they try to warn folks to stay inside. They're not spraying with DDT, which was the big anti-insecticide back in my youth. which proved to have cancer-producing problems. This is not that, but it's still something that you don't want to necessarily take a big inhalation of when they're out there. And you all probably are familiar. We are always talking about what you can do individually to prevent mosquito bites. The 5 Ds. 5 Ds meaning avoid going out in dawn or dusk, because that's where these mosquitoes like to be flying. Dress appropriately, so that means if at all possible, long sleeves, long pants, trying to make sure that you don't have a lot of exposed skin anywhere. We like the anti-mosquito medication called DEET, not DDT, DEET. Anything higher than 25% DEET is a very good way of repelling the mosquitoes. There are other things people use, eucalyptus and lemon oil and other things, but I think that the most effective one clearly is DEET. And some of the DEET formulations now really last all day, even if you're out on the beach or sweaty or things like that. You don't have to reapply it constantly. And then the last D is draining standing water. So if you live in a house or you live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of little culverts or kind of stagnant areas where water collects after a rainstorm, or like a barrel is sitting around, or a bird bath is sitting there that hasn't been emptied in a long time. These are the places where the mosquito larvae like to multiply, and that's where you can help by either draining those areas yourself or letting the mosquito control people. They actually come around and do this for us. They actually put in little larvicidal medications into some of the standing water that they can't drain to prevent the larvae from multiplying. And overall, that's the best medicine that we can give to all of you to prevent the mosquitoes from propagating and potentially causing you harm. It's interesting that in 1900, just 2 days ago, was the anniversary of Dr. Walter Reed, whose name is now on the big hospital down in Washington. He began his research on preventing yellow fever in Cuba. The United States was at war with Cuba at the time, and the soldiers, the Rough Riders that were being led by Teddy Roosevelt at the time before he became president, were more of those Rough Riders were dying from yellow fever than they were from bullets from Spain, because we were in the middle of the Spanish-American War. And he started to study how yellow fever spread. He had no idea how to take care of it because they didn't have any antivirals, they didn't have any antibacterial medication, but those 5 Ds were really discovered by him. And he reduced the number of people that got yellow fever by 98%. And he got a presidential award for that. And his techniques were then used in the third and last successful attempt to build the Panama Canal in 1914. For many, many attempts before that, the workers were all dying of yellow fever and they couldn't complete the project. But finally in 1914, using his research, they were able to prevent the workers from getting ill, and we got the Panama Canal. He didn't live to see it because in 1902, he died of a ruptured appendix. So that's a very tragic end to a surgeon. I guess he didn't realize that he had appendicitis till it was very far advanced. That's one set of insects that we care about a lot. And then, of course, ticks. Ticks are omnipresent here in the Commonwealth. More commonly, the Cape and the Islands and Bristol County, Plymouth County. but we have plenty here in Central Mass. And the best thing you can do for that, again, if you're going to take walks in the woods or walks in a field and it's high grass, you have to realize that that's where the ticks love to hitchhike. And if you have exposed skin over your socks and you're wearing sandals and things like that, very important for you to do a little mini inspection when you come back from one of those walks. Also check your dogs and whatever other animals you might have for ticks on a regular basis, because they can make your dogs quite sick, but they also can jump off your dogs eventually and jump onto you. And it's not just Lyme's disease now. We know ticks are carrying 4 or 5 other blood-borne diseases that all kind of create this very strange presentation of weakness and just an achy, lousy feeling. That people call it malaise. It's not really an acute thing like when you get sick with a flu or something like that. It's more of a gradual weakness thing, and unfortunately it can be a chronic thing as well. So if you recognize that you have a tick, you have to make sure when you take it off of you, use a really good set of forceps or tweezers, as you might call it, and get the whole tick out. If you leave a remnant piece in there, it can still transfer some of these germs into your bloodstream. And if you notice after taking it out that you develop what's we call in medicine a target sign, meaning right where the bite is, it's red, then there's a little circle of white around it, and then another halo of red. That probably means that this is a significant bite, and you need to talk to your doc about getting a dose of antibiotic to keep it from propagating. The dosing is only like a 2-day dose of a medication called doxycycline, and it really will knock it dead, but it's of course better not to get the bite if you can avoid it. DEET will also repel some of these ticks, but we have a tough problem with this because the deer population is growing. We have less hunting going on, and the deer propagate the ticks, transport them around, then they drop off, they jump onto you, they jump onto your pet. So we're expecting, again, because of the mild winter, a lot of tick action this summer. And we'll be sending out periodically from the Department of Public Health alerts about that if we hear of a hot spot where people are getting it. But I know if you go to Broadmeadow Brook, where the Audubon Society outdoor walk is, you'll get instructions about that as well. So, these are things that go along with July that aren't so much fun, but I think overall most people would agree that July is a pretty fun month. So the last thing I'm going to say about July is, funny enough, July 1st, which is this Saturday, is World Doctors Day. So we already have a national recognition that March 30th is our United States Doctors Day. And we, as a profession, I can tell you here in Worcester, the Worcester District Medical Society Alliance usually throws an event for us, and the hospitals both have ice cream socials for us and things. I feel like I've been so blessed to have been able to take care of little kids and their families. It's never really felt like I needed more of a reward than that, but it is nice to think that people value what we do. I think there was that period of time in the beginning of the pandemic when, whether it was Italy or Spain or New York City, where people were out with their spoons banging on pots at a change of shift at 7 o'clock for the doctors and nurses that were dealing with the initial wave of COVID patients. It was very heartwarming to see that kind of support. I think over the next 2 years of the pandemic, I think we lost a little bit of our luster because there was so much confusion and divisiveness about what the recommendations should have been. Should we have closed the schools and not the bars? And bars should have been closed. I think we're all in the process now, the Department of Public Health. That's something I wanted to talk to Mr. Dennis about when he gets here, of evaluating, looking backwards and seeing, what worked, what didn't work, what can we learn moving forward if, God forbid, we face another pandemic again soon. Would we have some better responses and approaches to whatever new threat comes in? Yes, we have a question. Thank you, Kylie.
So I have some questions that you may not have answers for. Number one, what is the current research of the ongoing effects of COVID for the young at heart? Number two, is there research being done for those people that have not gotten COVID? What is it that they have in their blood, in their immune systems that we don't have? And number three, particularly in Worcester, okay, how many people have gotten COVID more than once?
Those are great questions. I can't answer the last one because I don't think we have all the stats on how many people were repeat COVID victims. I think that as far as the first one, we do have a program at BU that we're collaborating with, and the neurology department at UMass is collaborating with them to follow up on long COVID.
Nice meeting.
The research is going to take years because we're just kind of cataloging all of the different protracted symptoms that people have. Some people have ended up with long-term headaches. That's why the neurology department is very involved. Some people have had muscle weakness. Oh, here's my friend, Mr. Solo Dennis. We can say hello. Welcome. I'm just answering some questions that were put to us that are pretty tough to answer, but so long COVID, I think you're going to hear a lot of information and a lot of research is being done on long COVID, but I don't think it's going to be something that's going to come out for a couple of years at least. And as for why some people didn't ever get COVID, it's a very tricky thing because I think some people who think they didn't get COVID really got COVID. So whoever steps forward, if there's a research study that is looking at those people, they will probably get tested, and if they are found to have antibodies or found to have antigen suggesting that they really did have a case of COVID, they'll probably be surprised, but they'll be left out. My wife is someone who didn't have COVID, and the only thing that I can think of, because I was certainly very exposed during those 3 years with lots of trips out to the community and in the hospital, is that she probably didn't hang out with me that much. I don't know. Is that possible? It's possible. It's possible. Yes, sir. So we have a wonderful volunteer, Kylie. I just want to point out, Kylie is a volunteer who is playing Phil Donahue today, going into the audience.
Thanks, Kylie.
Okay.
I just, my wife didn't feel comfortable getting the shots. She has a heart condition. And I got every shot. In fact, I got the most recent one about a month and a half ago. But I did 2 years ago in the summer, I had symptoms and I did the test, the at-home test, and I was positive. I said, "Oh, you got to take this test because you're not immune at all." And she was okay, but then 2 days later, she said, "Oh, I had the worst sore throat in my life." I said, "Got to test you." She was positive. I had her call her internist. They scheduled a monoclonal antibody infusion. The next morning, after 2 days, she was fine. But they had also come out with the pill. And the pill was just starting to be administered. And my question is, which is more effective? Are they still doing the infusion? Because it seems like they're really kind of recommending the pill rather than the infusion.
Yes, those are great questions. So personally, when I came down with COVID in September of 2022, I was on enough medication that interacted poorly with the pill that I got the infusion. And that's kind of how they're dealing with it now. If you have certain medications, and most of them are cardiac-related medications, they won't recommend taking the Paxlovid pill, and you'll get the infusion. But they're really pushing hard on the Paxlovid. And the downside with Paxlovid is that a very small percentage of people that took the pill, which you have to take within 5 days of onset of symptoms, had a rebound effect where after getting rid of the disease the first week after you take it, about 2 weeks later, they would come up with symptoms again and would test positive. Nobody understands that group. That's being studied too. So, but I think that Paxlovid is right now probably the #1 way that they would recommend. Now, who should get Paxlovid? So our population here is probably the most vulnerable, and they recommend for folks over 65, for folks with pulmonary disease, cardiac disease, again, dependent on what kind of meds you're on, patients with immune deficiency or cancer, or obese patients should probably get Paxlovid. You'll find some of the PCPs will say, well, let's see once you have the positive test, let's see how sick you get, or let's just see how you feel tomorrow. You do have a couple of days to decide, but it's important, I think, to even get the pill prescribed and have it handy so you don't suddenly get sick on the 4th day and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you don't have it handy to start taking it. So a lot of the docs will prescribe it, but say, don't start taking it till you check with me. Kylie, there's somebody back there. Sorry. We're going to give you your running shoes a workout. Then we're going to interrupt the Q&A just for a little bit so we can talk to Mr. Dennis.
Yeah, well, maybe this is a question for him, I'm not sure. But I'd like to go back to hepatitis. I think hepatitis is something that we don't talk about a lot. The doctors don't inform you about it a lot, and somebody in your family can have hepatitis, and you have different forms. You have A, B, C, and what do you do at that point? I mean, sometimes it's like you gotta boil your dishes or your spoons or forks or something, but there's not enough information out about hepatitis. If it's only about needles, if it's about sex. So I think we need to focus on some of that too, based on the drugs that's out there and how many people are shooting heroin and cocaine or whatever. So I think going forward, we wanna put that in our health system too, more about the difference of A, B, and C hepatitis.
I think that's a great point. So C is the one that is most commonly associated with needles and drug use. It also, all three of these can be transmitted through a tainted transfusion. Back in the 80s, before blood was really being screened for a lot of these things, there were a lot of tainted transfusions, and that's how people got them. A is usually a result of a contaminant like that you got exposed to either in food or in water. Dr. Morse, who was our iconic Department of Public Health leader, and actually was the leader of the department when Mr. Dennis was a lowly intern in our department many years ago, won accolades because he figured out that Holy Cross football team, which was ranked #1 in the country in 1969, got hepatitis from a tainted bubbler or water fountain on their campus grounds. It's such a classic forensic tale of how he figured it out that it's still taught in public health schools today. And by the way, Dr. Morse is alive and well, retired in Alexandria, Virginia. I just spoke to him for his birthday a couple of months ago, and he says, I still read the Worcester Telegram and Gazette every day. So I agree with you, and I think that that's a very good comment for us to put out some information. We have a wonderful public information person, Matthew Moore, that does a newsletter for us, and we'll take that into account for sure. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. So I don't want to cut off discussion. We can have more questions, but I wanted Mr. Dennis to introduce himself. He has been now our director at the Division of Public Health since January, and he's hit the ground running because he has an enormous amount of experience that maybe he'll give us a little bio for. So Solo, will you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes, I would say good day to everyone. My apology, as Dr. Hurst alluded to, I have a very high-pitched job, and I'm always running around, so my apologies for being late. But I just want to say thanks so much for this opportunity to come and meet everyone. Being the director for the Division of Public Health in the city of Worcester. Worcester is the heart of Massachusetts, as you all know, so it's an honor and privilege to be in the city and working in the city and being in this forum. To give a little brief overview about myself, how I came into public health, I'll tell you a funny story, right? I grew up 5 minutes from here on what is in Ackno Street. You all know what Ackno Street is? Yeah. Okay, I grew up in Ackno Street, so passing this building is something that I remember vividly, growing up in Worcester, and being an immigrant from West Africa, Liberia. Coming to America, it's always been a privilege to be a part of society and contribute to society. So I came to Worcester. My parents from West Africa, Liberia. You all know what West Africa, Liberia is, right? Excellent, good. So I went to the University of Massachusetts, UMass Amherst, the best college in Massachusetts, by the way, right? And from there, I studied public health. I have a master's in public health. And from there, I used to work for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. In that capacity, I was the emergency preparedness planner for Hampton County, which is the largest county in Western Massachusetts, right? Through that work, went on to work for the State Department of Public Health as the regional director for the Western Regional Health Office in Northampton. Doing that work for 3 years, I went to work in the city of Springfield as the Deputy Public Health Commissioner for the city of Springfield. And luckily for me, this position was open. Being a Worcester guy, growing up in Worcester, I wanted to come home. So I was privileged and honored to be awarded this position, and I'm here today. Right, the Division of Public Health is like maybe 15 minutes from this building, right? And we are doing a lot of important public health work to improve everyone's lives in Worcester, but also the 3 Alliance community that we work with. So when Dr. Hurst asked me to come and be part of this discussion today, it was an honor to come and listen, but but also talk about some of the amazing work we're doing around stuff like looking at how can we engage the senior around making sure you have all your flu shots, you have all the relevant information that you can share with your family and friends. And so that's why I'm definitely here today to listen and see how can we be more supportive to you all, but also talk about ways that we can continue our partnership and our work. So thank you.
So we're going to wrap up our Stay Connected session today. I want to thank Mr. Dennis for coming out and being with us. I want to thank all of you for your participation and for the really great questions and the really great issues you've brought up. And we will not ignore them. We will incorporate them into our thinking. And I hope you have a great month of July, and we'll be back in some iteration in August. Thank you.